So let's look now about how we would accomplish the same task but with a lot less code by using the CSV module. So CSV files have been around for decades. They're often called just flat files. Um, Before they predated spreadsheets. Certainly, and most people are probably used to thinking about spreadsheets and don't realize that you can easily take any spreadsheet and export it to a CSV file, and then you have a data file that you can just very easily parse with a programming language like Python. So CSV files have been around for so long that this is standard kind of code that most people would know how to handle. And so we're going to use this module called CSV, which is short for comma separated values. We're going to use the module in Python to do all this work for us. And I need to point out that even though it's called CSV, it's very common for the delimiter, which here is a comma. That delimiter is very commonly a tab character too, or a pipe, or any other kind of character. So here we're specifying that the delimiter is a comma, but it could really be anything. And so don't let the name CSV for the module make you think that it's limited just to comma separated values. It is common for if a file ends in .csv, then that's usually indicating that it is a CSV file. And if it ends maybe in like .txt or .tab for tab, that might be an indicator that the delimiter is a tab character. But you can't rely on that. You really have to know. You have to look at it yourself and make sure you know what the delimiter is. So here I'm going to show you how there's a using CSV file here that we can look at, and we can look at how we could write the same idea using the CSV dict reader. So inside the CSV module, there are a lot of methods that you can use for reading a file. It's not required that a CSV file's first line be the column names. There may not be any column names at all, in which case a lot of times you just have to know what the column names are, like maybe there's some documentation somewhere, and so therefore you're using the CSV module to simply parse each line and breaking it up on its delimiter and handling all that. Here we're going to be specifically using the dict reader method to create this reader object that's going to take our file handle that we're opening here, and we're telling it what the delimiter is. And then we're going to be able to use this code for rec and reader. We're basically just treating reader like it's this iterable, and rec is for record. And what that's going to do is just automatically behind the scenes, it's going to take the first line, it's going to make that into the headers, and then it's going to properly parse each row of input, zip those together with the headers, and create a dictionary. And so what we're going to end up with here, we have records as a list, and then we're appending that. So we're going to end up with a list of dictionaries, exactly the same. So if I do using CSV1 here and I run that, I see the same output as I saw with the let's see, the manual one.py, exact same output. It's just I don't have to write all that code to handle the zipping and the parsing and all that. I'm letting the CSV module do that for me. Let's see, so using what we see here is I'm doing the same trick that we've seen many times of initializing some sort of an empty like a list or an empty string, and then I do using a for loop and then appending or adding to that empty list. We can do the same thing with really a list comprehension, and here I'm showing you just how simple that can be. I'm just calling list, the list function, on the reader. So I'm telling the reader, I'm coercing it into a list, and then that gives me back a list of dictionaries. So it's exactly the same output. We want to use the CSV module to read the input for us. And I want to introduce this idea. I would like you to think about creating a function to read the file handle. And there's a reason for that, because we're going to start off with thinking about what it looks like to have well-formed, good input. But then we're going to have to think about what happens when we have bad input, poorly formed data. So how are we going to handle that? So in our module, let's see, I'm going to open back up the wad.py, and I'm going to create a function here. I'm going to call it def read CSV, and it's going to take a file handle, and it's going to read, let's see, what do I have here? Read the CSV input. Sounds good. And for the moment, I'm just going to say pass. I'll have to figure out what it's going to do. But I'm thinking, along the lines of we need something to read a file handle. And then, of course, we're going to need to define a test for that. So test read CSV. Now, the test underscore is really the only required part. I could call it test 1. But since it's testing the CSV function, I like to call it test underscore, the name of the function that it's testing. And this takes no inputs. And let's see, the doc string is going to be test read CSV. Pretty obvious. And I'm going to copy this code over here from the PDF. Let's see how that goes. So I don't have to type all that. And so I'm going to create a text, a bit of text. And if I were to just make this the string here, then it wouldn't actually work, because we're thinking here that read CSV is going to handle a file handle, because that's what we're going to be getting back from argparse, because we define this as a type of a file type. So we're getting back a file handle. So I'm thinking about how do I create a string but make it act like a file handle. Now, we saw this in a much earlier chapter. I think maybe it was the Howler chapter, where we talked about using the IO string IO module to basically turn this string into something that will behave like a file handle. It will produce values like reading each line from a file handle. So the first line will go from here to the new line character there. That's the first line of input. And then the next, so that will be our headers. And then the next line is burpees 20 to 50, and then including that new line. And then the new line will be stripped off. And so this basically is acting like the input. And so what I'm trying to think about is, okay, if I give it something that looks like that, what I want to get back is a data structure that is a list of tuples that has the name of the exercise, the low value, and the high value. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, wait, why did we talk about dictionaries and all that when what we're trying to get is this structure? Well, obviously I've already worked through this, and towards the end, this is really the data structure I'm going to need. I'm going to need a list of tuples that has the exercise and then some value that I can print, like some number between 20 and 50. And notice that these are the integer values 20 and 50, not the string values. So this read CSV is going to have to take all this, parse this out, find the 2050, convert them to numbers, and then put it all together as this data structure. So that's what I want to get back. And so I'm thinking ahead, what do I need to write here to produce this output? So that's where we're going to go next.